Hi, I'm Tracey Masella, and we are back with Straight Talk with Tracey. I'm joined today by Micaela Scully, a social worker at Silver Hill Hospital and the Triangle Community Center in Norwalk, Connecticut. Thanks for joining us, Micaela.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So today we're going to have some straight talk about LGBTQ issues,
Yep.
right? So by straight, in this context, we mean open and honest.
Yeah,
So I thought we would start by talking about some basic definitions of the LGBTQ community.
Yes, absolutely. I know definitions are something that gets really mixed up for a lot of people. Some people know the basic definitions, and then there are so many definitions. Basically, the LGBTQ, the basic format we use is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning. So queer is a term that has a lot of heat for some people, but it's actually a reclaimed affirmative term. There's a lot of community centers and colleges that use that word, like as queer studies majors. It's an okay term to use as long as you're not using it in a derogatory way. So anything could be kind of used in a derogatory way if you want it to be, but if someone identifies as a queer individual, it's fine to use. So that reclaimed term is empowering for a lot of people to take that on. And some people use it to define the LGBT community as a whole. They might say the queer community, they might say the gay community. LGBTQ is pretty widely used, but that is also okay to say.
Right.
There's a number of other terms that are really commonly used now as well. For example, one you might hear a lot is pansexual, which means that you are attracted to someone regardless of gender. So someone might identify as male, female, they may not identify as either. You still have the potential for attraction.
That brings up an interesting point to me. Definitionally, I think that people get confused between gender issues and sexuality issues. So maybe you can tell us, how do we discern between those two?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I think it's so confusing because it's all in one term, right? LGBTQ. So people think that, okay, maybe these issues are the same or they're interconnected. They are interconnected because obviously if someone identifies as someone who is attracted to the same gender, then gender comes into play, right?
Right.
So gender is basically how you identify yourself in feeling like you are male or female or neither or both. So, and sexuality is who you are attracted to.
I see.
So who you are attracted to could be anywhere along the spectrum. How you identify gender-wise could actually be anywhere along the spectrum as well. Traditionally, people think of these things as binary, meaning black and white. So male or female, boy or girl, and sexuality, gay or straight. And really both are more of a spectrum. And people are starting to identify with that more and more and come to an understanding of what that means and think of it in a less traditional way.
Right.
And it's not the first time that that's happened. A lot of people think that it's this new thing to see things on a spectrum, but really if we look at ancient cultures all over the world, they've had a more broad view of gender and sexuality for as long as we've been recording it. It's just over time, as many more traditional views came into play, that kind of got downplayed. So
interesting. So are there statistics about over time? I've heard at one point at any given time 8% of the population identifies as LGBTQ. That might be an old statistic that I've heard, but is there any current research that shows that over a period of time there hasn't been a tremendous increase in people who identify in this way?
So that's really difficult to answer because we do have statistics, and at the same time there are reasons why people wouldn't come forward or do not identify in that way publicly or would want to put it on any kind of paperwork. Exactly. Right. So it's really tough for us to know, and that gets into other issues of like discrimination and things like that we can touch on. But it's very difficult to get statistics on this population because someone might have a different definition of what it means to be in the community for them than someone else does. So it's very difficult to get statistics, but there are many, many people who identify this way or have feelings like other people in the LGBT community. So something important to recognize is attraction and self-identification and behavior are 3 separate things. So someone may have been in a relationship with a same-sex partner and identify as straight. Someone might be attracted to someone of the same or different gender and identify in a different way. So attraction and behavior and identity are 3 totally separate things. And that, I think, can get very confusing for people. Like, well, why does this woman have a boyfriend if she identifies as bisexual?
Right.
Or if you've, engaged in sexual relations with someone of the same sex, why do you identify as straight? So it's very confusing for people. So those 3 things, it's just important to understand what someone's comfortable with and what their experience is.
Right.
So it can be tough.
So given that confusion, both internally and in any given environment that someone is in a family, in a community, in a school, what are some of the major issues that kids that are in this community are facing?
That's a great question. So I would first say that questioning gender or sexual orientation is a absolutely normal part of our development, but for some, it continues for a longer period of time. Pretty much all of us have said, am I a boy? Am I a girl? And some people just is, yeah. And that is questioning. That is wondering what I am and who I am in the world. And we all do that. And the same occurs when we realize that that we might have feelings that are different from our peers when it comes to who we're attracted to or who we want to be close to, who we want to be around, who we might have sexual feelings with or just romantic feelings for. And we question these, and then we discern things from these questions. Now, I think while this natural questioning is happening for kids, there's more and more information out there. They have access to more information that might help give definition to their experience. And labels have the power to be very affirming, but they can also be very oppressing at the same time. So I think way far in the future, we won't really need labels very much, but right now it really is empowering for people who are different and have different feelings or feelings that are less common to feel affirmed and to know that there are other people who have these feelings as well. So for someone to use an identifier, it can really help them function in the world because it helps them, even if it's a box with very, very dimmed edges, very dimmed edges, it is something, and it feels like you have a place in the world. And I think, sometimes parents and teachers and even peers get very scared. What does this mean for this person? What does this mean for my child?
Sure.
And really the best thing to do is to just really try and be as understanding as possible to where someone's at in the moment. The questioning period could continue for a long time, and just understanding that it's okay and normal to question and just to meet someone where they're at. So some of the biggest challenges might be peers who are not understanding, peers who either don't acknowledge these feelings in themselves or who have never had these feelings become fearful or aggressive of things that they don't understand. I mean, kids can be pretty brutal.
Yes.
Bullying is not a new thing. It's existed forever, and it's just year after year people find new things like to point out. If something's different about someone, I want to point it out or make a comment about it so I can feel more secure in my space is typically what we see.
Right.
But what that does is so damaging to the other person because they might feel innately flawed in some way, when really it's just human variation. Gender and sexuality is human variation. Right.
That's a good way to put it. So even though we've had an increase, mostly probably due to social media and the internet and access to information, though kids have more ways to identify and feel a part of, not so alone and not so marginalized, I think in individual communities they probably still are pretty marginalized in certain families, in certain religions, in certain cultures, in certain communities.
Absolutely.
Is there an increased risk because of that marginalization for mental health issues, anxiety, depression, suicidality, eating disorders?
100%, yes. So that's a really great question. For those who are in the LGBT community, they have a higher risk of all of what you just said, all of those, for mental health issues, for substance abuse, for eating disorders, homelessness, all of those things. So the reason that is primarily due to lack of acceptance and internalized shame, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, whatever it is that's internalized from your environment. It's not like, oh, someone who is in the queer community is innately born with these genes of also having mental illness and substance abuse. Those are totally separate.
Right.
It's just the fact that they are dealing with another stressor. And we call that minority stress, and other minorities experience this as well. Just having a certain place in the world and not feeling as secure and safe as other people who do not experience that minority stress might feel is another risk factor that's tacked on, added on, including, you know, that might be added on to other family stressors, to genetic predisposition for mental illness or eating disorders or substance abuse that's already there, and then tack on another stressor of being in a community that not everybody understands.
Right.
That raises the risk quite a bit. And there's not always support out there. People don't necessarily know how to cope. And people might utilize things that they're just utilizing to get by, whether it's substances or acting out as kids, you know, just not understanding where they fit. And that's something that, I mean, it's hard enough to be a teenager, you know, when you're not an LGBTQ youth, but to not understand this other aspect of who you are can be really tough and really detrimental, so.
Really good information. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'd like to talk about how can members of these youth support teams, so from families to peers to teachers to community providers, how can we support these kids as they go through this period of questioning and possibly transition?
Okay, excellent.
For 1 in 4 Americans, mental illness hits close to home. And since 1931, Silver Hill Hospital has also been close to home. For individuals and families facing the challenges of mental illness, Silver Hill offers a highly trained, compassionate staff that provides state-of-the-art care in a beautiful and private setting. If mental health issues hit close to home, remember, there's a world-class psychiatric hospital right in the neighborhood.
Hi, welcome back. I'm here today with Micaela Scully from Silver Hill Hospital and the Triangle Community Center in Norwalk, Connecticut. We're talking about LGBTQ issues, a really hot topic and one that is often misunderstood by many, many people. So what I'd like to talk about now is how youth can find support among their family members, among their peers, among their teachers, among community providers, in a time where people may not be able to help them in a validating or understanding way. One of the things you talked earlier about questioning being a natural part of development, right? All kids can question at any given time throughout their developmental trajectory. Am I a boy? Am I a girl? Do I like boys? Do I like girls? Parents that I have spoken to with kids that, particularly kids that are going through possible transgender, biologically identifying as a boy or a girl, and then identifying personally as the opposite sex or gender. And how do parents not get into the trap of, well, this might just be a phase?
That's a very good question. So first I want to say that, you know, someone who identifies as transgender might identify anywhere along the spectrum. It's someone who might identify as anything other than the gender they were assigned at birth. So if they were assigned male at birth from looking at, you know, external genitalia, they might identify as genderqueer. Some, you know, not a boy or a girl or both, or they might identify as female. It's just anything other than, you know, how they were assigned at birth, which is also another layer of confusion for parents, I would imagine.
Right.
I think it's very natural for parents to get stuck on this idea of, well, how do they know it's not a phase? Because especially if a child starts to begin talking about transition and things that could become very permanent, I mean, I think that would scare any parent.
Sure.
Any parent who cares about their child wants the best for them and wants them to not experience, you know, more difficulty
Suffering.
in life than they have to deal with.
Right.
And at the same time, I would encourage parents to really do their research and also remind them that no transgender person would choose to go through that because it is such a difficult way to function, and there's so many people who don't understand that people do not choose to go through this difficulty by their own volition. It's not something that they would probably ever force upon someone else. And at the same time, it's something that I hope that they will become proud of because it's a part of who they are. You know, it's again, variation in the human experience. And, you know, it's all taking it one step at a time, one day at a time, educating yourself, talking to doctors, talking to your child first and foremost is the most important, you know, understanding what they have to say and without assumption and non-judgmentally. Because if your child feels heard, even if they know that you don't know all the answers, if they feel heard, that's where they're going to feel the most validated. One of the most common things I hear from parents is, you know, I don't want them to have more trouble in life than they have to. But a lot of what they don't realize is, you know, those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind. And you want to be the one in this person's life who matters, right? Who is going to accept someone for who they are, because if they have support in the home, it's going to make navigating the rest of the world so much easier.
I see.
So navigating the world is much more difficult if the people at home don't even believe in who you are. And it's also true that someone can be questioning their gender and that might not end up being who they are in the future. And that's okay too. It's just affirming wherever the person is at in that moment in time and being open to the exploration of that. And especially small children, I think people get very worried, but basically having an open exploration of, you know, whether it's toys or dress or anything.
Nail polish.
Yeah, like
Right.
allowing that, because the child will settle where they feel the most comfortable, and it will only cause stress, anxiety, higher propensity for mental illness and other difficulties in their life if they are pushed in a direction that doesn't feel right. If they are allowed to naturally settle in the spot and in the gender or the gender expression that feels most comfortable, they're going to have a much healthier and secure sense of self. And I think that's what parents truly want for their child, to be able to be happy and successful, and that comes from having a secure sense of self.
Self, right, identity,
Yeah.
right. So starting with names, I know a lot of youth start this exploration by trying on a different name, sometimes a gender neutral name, to see how that works. If your child comes home and wants to be identified by a different name, or among friends, or changes their name on Facebook, what would someone do, a peer or a family member, do with that name change?
I think peers have less of a hard time with it. I think kids now are kind of like, okay.
Right.
You know, the same as if, you know, someone said, oh, my name's Michael, but I go by my middle name as Jeff. It's like, okay, Jeff. Like, you know, it's becoming more and more, accepted in that regard.
Right.
I think it's harder for parents and family, especially when
They gave the name.
you gave that
Yes.
name. It feels you feel offended almost that your child wants to take away this name that you so carefully chose and cultivated, and you had this idea of what your child would grow up to be, and they are squashing that in front of your face,
right.
and
Right.
it's almost, I think, taken personally
Yes.
when it's not about that necessarily. So I wouldn't blindly accept it. I would ask about it. I would say, so what's this about? You know, I want to know, I want to understand. and acknowledge whatever your feelings are about it before going into the conversation, I think is really important. If you're feeling angry, ask yourself what that's about. If you're feeling scared, ask yourself what that's about so you can bring that to the conversation, and your facial expression won't be telling this kid that you're disappointed in them, that you're angry with them, because kids pick up on that very easily with their parents, I think more so than many parents might realize. I mean, if you remember, you know, what you picked up on from your parents as a kid, you're like, they said this, but I know they meant this, right? So really looking at what your assumptions and judgments are beforehand, and then just asking the question like, oh, I noticed, you know, you changed your name, or you told me you wanted to use this name. Tell me about that. Instead of asking a question like, does this mean this? Does this mean this? Saying something like, can you tell me about that? What is this about for you?
I love that, opening the conversation, because those pointed questions, as you said earlier, the kid might not know.
Oh yeah.
Kid might not have the definitive answer. And to say I don't know back to a parent who's approaching the conversation with anger and fear gives them, I would imagine, more justification to say, well, see, this, you don't even know what's going on.
That's exactly right. I find that all the time. Well, they can't even tell me. They might not even know themselves.
That's right.
I think kids are coming out earlier and earlier, or at least being more open about their questioning earlier and earlier. Because they're seeing so much in social media, and because they're seeing so much, and that's a beautiful thing, because, you know, when I was younger, and that was not that long ago, there were not that many examples of queer people in the media.
That's
and
right.
Positive examples, it was like Ellen, or, you know, like there were only a couple people. So now that there are more people, that's great, and at the same time, that's creates expectations of what you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to look like. I see transgender women in the media, and how can I ever look like that?
Right.
Like, that creates even more different expectations. But the point is, you know, kids are coming out earlier and earlier, being more and more comfortable with questioning earlier and earlier, and the systems surrounding them aren't ready for it yet. Parents aren't ready for it yet. Teachers aren't ready for it yet. So it's not like this is a new phenomenon. It's just that people are more open to talking about it. And at the same time, the rates of homelessness for LGBTQ youth are higher than they ever have been before, because kids are coming out earlier and earlier, and parents are saying, hit the curb.
Yeah.
So people say, oh, well, it's getting better. Isn't everything getting better? Yes and no. Like you said, individual communities, not necessarily. And so when someone doesn't have a supportive home, that's going to increase their likelihood. I mean, the rate of, that increases their likelihood of HIV/AIDS, it increases their likelihood of mental illness, substance abuse, all of that, when you don't have a supportive home to go back to.
I want to end with resources. So you are an integral part of the Triangle Community Center in Norwalk, which is the only LGBT community-based program in our county. Is that correct?
Yeah, the only LGBTQ center in our entire county. So they started very small, and they've been around for over 20 years now, and I run a transgender, gender questioning, genderqueer youth group there, and there's a number of different programs there. There's also, you know, general LGBTQ youth programming. They have Pride in the Park every year. They have support groups. They have social groups. They have 12-step meetings there. They have all sorts of events that they curate, you know, on monthly basis, weekly basis, and they educate the community. They go out and educate the community. So they go to schools, they go to police stations, they go everywhere. So it's an incredible organization that's doing so much for our community, and they have case management resources there. So if any parents or family members or youth are in need of resources, going to just email them or call them and to get a list, case management resources. You know, I want a therapist who understands, you know, bisexuality, like just anything, you can get it there, any resource. And there's also True Colors out of Hartford has a huge resource list as well, of, you know, affirming churches. I mean, everything that you would want to find, they have. So definitely give to these support organizations.
Yes.
There are obviously larger organizations, but those are the Connecticut ones.
Local for
the
our
local
kids,
ones,
right?
yeah,
And our
absolutely.
families, yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being with us
Yeah.
today. We are going to have a list of resources on our website at Silver Hill Hospital and also associated with this broadcast. So
Great.
thank you so much for being with us.
Thank
This
you
is
for
a
having me.
huge topic. We could probably talk for hours
Oh,
and hours.
absolutely.
But I very much appreciate your expertise and your time.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank you.
having me.
Thank you for joining me for Straight Talk with Tracey. If you have questions, or there is a topic you would like us to discuss, or someone in your community has something to say about mental health, please email your ideas to askthedoctor@silverhillhospital.org. Please join me next month, where I will be visited by Dr. Erin Clyfield, and we will talk about body image and self-esteem.